Hi, my name's James. I'm one of the paleontologists at Melbourne Museum. Whenever we go out on a dig, it's important to make sure we have all the right tools. So here are just some of the things that I like to bring with me. First tool we've got here is known as a geohammer, and this is essentially used to help break up rock that the fossils are trapped in. If there is a specific part of the rocks that we want to break open though, we usually use a hammer and a chisel. And this is essentially to help us create splits in the rock, and we give it a little tap and the rock will essentially split up and fall away. When we want to work a bit closer to the fossil is stuff like an anvil or a pick, and this helps us move tiny bits of rock away from the bone. Next, tweezers, and so the tweezers are essentially used to help us move about small bits of bone that have broken loose to make sure we don't lose it. So very important for handling small bones that might otherwise be crushed by my big fingers. You might think this is a bit silly. Paintbrushes are very useful in order to make sure that the site is clear. So this is used to essentially brush away any dirt or dust from the fossil to make sure your work area is clean. And my next item you might find in your bathroom cupboard. This is a toothbrush. Might seem a bit of an odd thing to use on a dinosaur dig, but it's essentially used the same way a brush is, where if you've got a very dirty workspace that you need to clear in small areas around the fossil, you need something with fine, short bristles to brush that dirt away. So the next part of my kit is glue, specifically super glue. Occasionally when we're digging fossils out, they break. And the last thing we want is to get back to the lab and not know how to put it back together. And the easiest way around this is to just fix it while we're on site. When we're digging, we eventually get our fossil out of the rock and ready to transport. But we can't just transport it as is, we need to protect it. And the way that we protect it is we wrap it with some sort of protective coating, usually toilet paper. So toilet paper isn't just useful for going to the loo, it's actually very useful and a cheap way to make sure we wrap up and protect fossils. So once we have wrapped up our fossil in a protective coating, we need a container to transport in. And there are two types of containers we use. For bigger fossils, we usually use a takeaway container. The other thing we use is a film canister by filling them with a little tissue paper for very tiny small fossils. So once we have our fossil wrapped and safely in a container, we then need to label what it is. First we have a label. It could usually be a sticky note. Occasionally though, we don't want to just have a label on the container, we also want to write on the fossil. So we have either a Sharpie, which we use to write on the rock, or we also have whiteout and a pen, and we use the whiteout to essentially make a clean surface in order for us to write on smaller fossils. And then last, and probably most importantly, we have our field book. So as paleontologists, we are scientists, and scientists write down everything they do. And this way, whenever we come back to the museum, we have a record of what the fossil is, where it was found, what it looked like when we found it, what the conditions are, any sort of information that might be important to help us essentially do science on the fossil later. If you're interested in learning more about the tools that paleontologists like me use, don't forget to check out our interactive dig site.